If you've spent any time at all in the world of trading, you've heard the name Mark Douglas. Now, he wasn't just some other analyst. The guy was a true pioneer, one of the very first trading coaches to focus almost entirely on psychology. And he did that because he understood a fundamental truth. The biggest, toughest battle you'll ever face in trading isn't with the market, it's with yourself. Does this feel a little too familiar? Yeah, it probably should. You've done your homework. You've got a solid plan, you see the perfect setup, you get into the trade, and then your own brain just completely sabotages you. You either grab your profits way too early because you're terrified of losing them, or you get greedy, ignore your own exit signal, and watch a beautiful winner turn into a painful loser. It is one of the most frustrating experiences a trader can have. And this quote from Douglas, man, it just cuts right through all the noise and all the excuses. It's so easy to blame the market, right? We say it's irrational, it's unpredictable, some news event came out of nowhere, but Douglas forces us to look in the mirror. He taught that the market is totally neutral. It just is. It doesn't care about you. It just provides opportunities. So when we lose, the problem isn't out there, it's in here. Mark Douglas actually gave this problem a name. He called it the profit gap. And think about it like this. You could have a trading strategy that when you backtest it looks like an absolute gold mine. But then you look at your account statement and the results, well, they're not even close. That gap, the one between what your system could do and what you actually make, that's the price you're paying for fear, for greed, and for hesitation. And our entire job as traders is to close that gap. So if we want to close that profit gap, we have to understand where it's coming from. And this brings us to what we can call the psychology trap. Let's dive into why even the absolute best trading strategy on the planet is basically doomed to fail if your mind isn't wired the right way. Douglas famously flipped the script with this 80-20 rule. And let's be real, most of us get this completely backward. We spend 80% of our time obsessing over indicators, tweaking systems, looking for that holy grail strategy. But Douglas argued that all of that work, that's only 20% of what leads to success. The real work, the 80% that really matters, is mastering the space between your ears. So why is the psychology part so hard? Well, it's because our brains are basically wired for a world that has nothing to do with financial markets. After you hit 3 or 4 winners in a row, your brain doesn't think, okay, I am successfully executing a strategy with a 60% probability of success. No way. It thinks, I'm a genius. I finally cracked the code. This next trade is a sure thing. We are hardwired to look for patterns and certainty, even where there's only probability. And that feeling, that sure thing feeling, it is the single most expensive emotion in all of trading. It's what leads directly to those massive account-blowing mistakes. You feel invincible, so you triple your position size. You feel arrogant, so you get rid of your stop loss because you're convinced the market has to turn around. You break the very rules that you put in place to protect yourself, all because of a fleeting and totally false sense of certainty. This really brings us to the 2 different mindsets a trader can have. Over on the left, you've got the amateur's certainty mindset. This is all driven by a deep psychological need to be right, to predict what's going to happen next. And on the right, you have the professional's probability mindset. They're not trying to predict anything. They are simply there to execute their edge and fully accept that the outcome of any single trade is, for all intents and purposes, random. And this right here is the absolute core of Mark Douglas' teachings. To actually succeed, you need a complete paradigm shift, a total mental rewiring. You have to train yourself to let go of that need to be right, and instead, learn to think purely in probabilities. It is without a doubt the hardest and the most important change any trader will ever make. The best analogy for this new mindset is to think like a casino. Seriously, the casino has no idea if you're going to win the next hand of blackjack. And frankly, they don't care at all. What they do know is that over thousands and thousands of hands, their tiny statistical advantage, their edge, all but guarantees they will make a profit. They are playing the long game of probabilities, not the emotional game of a single outcome. That is exactly how a professional trader needs to operate. So, to build this casino-like mindset, Douglas said you have to basically burn these 5 fundamental truths into your brain until you believe them without question. Number 1, anything can happen. That A-plus setup, the one that's worked perfectly 10 times in a row, it can and it absolutely will fail. Number 2, you don't need to predict anything to make money. You don't need a crystal ball, you just need an edge that pays out over time. 3, wins and losses are randomly distributed. A winning streak doesn't make you a genius, and a losing streak doesn't mean your system is broken. 4, an edge is just a probability. It is not a guarantee. It's just a slight tilt in your favor, and that's it. And number 5, every single moment in the market is unique. Stop expecting the past to repeat itself perfectly. So how do you actually put this into practice? Well, you stop thinking trade by trade. You completely change your mental framework. Your goal isn't to win the next trade. Your goal is to perfectly execute your strategy over a series of trades, let's say the next 20. And this simple shift forces you to focus on your process, not the random outcome of any one event, and it lets your edge actually play out over a large enough sample size. Okay, so having the right mindset is the foundation, right? But a foundation isn't much use without a house built on top of it. And that brings us to the action plan. This is where the theory of probabilities becomes a practical, day-to-day reality, and we do it using Mark Douglas's 7 principles of consistency. All right, principle number 1. You must have a clearly defined edge. This is not up for debate. An edge is just a specific set of market conditions that gives you a higher probability of one thing happening over another. If you can't write down your edge in one simple sentence, you don't have one. You're just gambling. Principle 2. You have to define your risk before you ever get into the trade. This is your stop loss. Before you even dream about the potential profit, you must decide the exact price you're willing to pay to find out if your edge is going to work this time. And this isn't just a technical thing. It's a psychological lifeline that saves you from making catastrophic emotional decisions in the heat of the moment. Now, principle 3 is where the real magic happens, and it's 100% psychological. See, it's not enough to just set a stop loss. You have to fully and completely accept the risk. Before you click the mouse, you tell yourself, I am totally okay with losing this money. It is the cost of doing business. When you pre-accept a risk, you neutralize fear, and then you can manage the trade with total objectivity, not panic. Principle 4, act on your edge without hesitation. When your setup appears, you pull the trigger. Period. It doesn't matter if your last 3 trades were losers or even your last 5. Remember, you're not trying to predict this one outcome. Your job is to execute your edge every single time it shows up over your sample size of 20 trades. Hesitation? That's just fear wearing a different mask, and it's the enemy of consistency. Principle 5 is the perfect cure for greed. Pay yourself as the market makes money available. Just like you define your risk, you have to have a predefined plan for taking profits. Don't fall into that trap of hoping every trade is going to be a grand slam home run. Your goal is systematic execution. When the market hits your target, you take the money. No emotion, just execution. Principle 6. You have to constantly monitor yourself for those emotional mistakes. Think of yourself like a scientist observing an experiment, and that experiment is you. Keep a trading journal. When you break a rule, don't just get mad. Ask yourself, why did I do that? What was I feeling? Was it fear of missing out? Was it greed? Was it that need to be right again? Identifying these emotional patterns is the only way you'll ever be able to fix them. And finally, principle 7, which really ties everything else together. You have to stay committed to these principles consistently. You follow your rules on every single trade, period. The outcome of your last trade has absolutely zero impact on what you do on this next one. True consistency is about trading without any expectation for a single outcome and trusting only in your process and your edge over the long run. So when you combine this probabilistic mindset with this action plan, you start to understand what the ultimate goal really is. And spoiler alert, it's not what most people think. It isn't just about making more money. It's about mastering your inner market, the one that's raging inside your own head. This means you have to totally redefine what success even means. A successful trade is not one that made money. A successful trade is one where you followed your plan flawlessly. You can have a losing trade that was a perfect success because you executed your process to the letter. And you can have a winning trade where you got lucky and broke all your rules. That is a failure because it just reinforces the bad habits that will eventually wipe you out. In the end, the money is just a byproduct. It's the scoreboard that tells you you're doing the real work. As Douglas so perfectly put it, who you become is the real profit. The discipline, the self-awareness, the emotional control you are forced to build, that's the real prize. Trading, when you do it right, is one of the most powerful journeys of self-development you can ever take. So I'll leave you with this final thought to really chew on. When you look at your trading results, are they a reflection of what the market is doing? Or are they a direct reflection of your own fears, your hopes, and your limiting beliefs about yourself and about money? Answering that question honestly, well, that's the very first step to mastering your inner market.